When we came out, especially among Punjabis, the risk of being beaten the out by your brothers, fathers, cousins was so great. I look at sometimes our Muslim Pakistani brothers and sisters, and I see that things haven't progressed for them as they have for us. Our children are going to be so privileged to grow up in a world that doesn't even look at sexuality anymore.
We're building the world's largest archive of LGBTQ+, global majority, and migrant stories. Every voice you hear helps preserve our shared history and inspire the next generation. If our mission speaks to you, show your support, subscribe to our channel, and share your story in the comments below. One voice, one story at a time. This is Oral Histories.
How you would describe your identity in terms of sexuality, gender, and cultural background?
So I'm a gay man, and I am a British Indian of Punjabi background.
What is your earliest memory of being a gay man from a Punjabi background?
So when I was 15, I came out, I suppose, entering the Birmingham scene. So we're talking about 1997, and how it was like going around her street. There were very, very few Asian people on the Birmingham scene at that time. So her street is where most of the gay bars are in Birmingham. Yeah, it's quite a culture shock. There was just hardly any Asians, and the other Asian people that were there were generally Pakistani, and a lot of them, no, all of them were that I came accounted were male escorts. And so that there was quite a quite a baptism of fire meeting them as a 15-year-old. And also the English people didn't quite know what to make of you, because they hadn't, the Asian people they had come across on the scene were very different at that time. Also, we were in a time, this is before heart treatment had come on board, the HIV drugs. And that meant HIV was at that time a death sentence. So as soon as you came onto the scene, as soon as you went to youth groups or phoned up the switchboard, you were bombarded with safe sex messages. There was no now there's alternatives. There wasn't at that time. And that lingering feeling of how people were coping with HIV there was such a sadness in the people you met. They'd lost their friends, their partners. It also, one thing that really struck me was, so I had never had an issue with my religion, never had an issue with my spirituality, but you'd come into a lot of contact, particularly in Birmingham, with a lot of people who are of Irish descent, and the trauma they suffered through their religion. And even amongst the Pakistanis I met, there was a huge amount of trauma inflicted on them through their religious backgrounds, from their family or their communities. I mean, coming out was one thing. And I always remember at school, the real thing that dividing line was between the white people and the Asian people. White people didn't really seem to care. And this was 97, so it was, things were changing in Britain. The white people really didn't care, but the Asian people took it as a personal affront to them. You came out, even if I went to school, which is probably 50-50 Pakistani and Indian, and probably a third of the population at that time was Asian. They all took offense to it. So that was where the homophobia came from. And that I felt. So in Birmingham, I just did not feel safe. And I knew I had to get out of, for many people, it was a big city. For me, it wasn't a big city. You just bumped into people you knew all the time. So that's why coming to London was really important. And I think my whole university life was just going out clubbing, going out enjoying myself, going out making friends. I suppose going to straight clubs was a thing. There's very few Asian people on the scene back then. And I remember my first time at Club Kali, and was it everything I hoped for? No, not at all. I was actually so despondent when I went there. I think I expected to see more emancipated gay men. And what I got were all these people, and it's hard to, because we live in such different times, but practically every single person there was going to get married to a woman, whether they were And most of these people were not bisexual. I remember thinking that. And I remember there was a really gorgeous guy that I got on with really well. And in another life, we would have been boyfriends. He was Pakistani. And no issue with that. From Pakistan, studying in London. And his basic pitch to me, and we got on really well. He was very handsome. And his basic pitch to me was, I'm going to study here. I think he's doing accountancy at LSE. I'm going to go back home and then I'm going to get married. And I was, but I'd like to have this monogamous relationship here. And I was like, well, the monogamy's fine. I have no issue with that. But why should I invest 4 or 5 years in you? And then you go back. And he just couldn't get it. And I mean, I'm not that naive. I get where he's coming from as well. But I was like, man, I find it quite disrespectful that you've even asked me this. Well, at least he was honest. That was the only thing I could say about that. For some reason, I seem to date more Pakistanis than I've never dated an Indian guy, Pakistani and white guys. And there was another Pakistani guy, which remember this one as well. He had a separate name and a separate identity on the gay scene. And that was not unusual. I never did it myself, but some people had different names. He did for 6 months. We went out. He would stay over at my place. I wouldn't really stay at his place, but that's fine. And I learned he had a different name. And he was like, well, what's the big deal? And I was like, well, actually, it's a big deal because it's a real lack of inauthenticity. You could have told me at any time. Actually, the warning signs were always there because I would say, oh, you've got the same name as this person who was a Pakistani cricketer at the time, or this person. You know, that's really cool. And he would go, oh, yeah. And it should have triggered something in me, but I didn't. I think it was after that I was like, come on, you can't go into these relationships where there's just dead ends. They have no future. And that was that battle between, I don't see it so much at the moment, but if you remember back to the Shrien Dewani case, because I can't really talk, as a lawyer, I can't talk about it much, but there was this big cultural battle between one side of us, which was saying, this is in the LGBT South Asian scene, saying, you need to live authentically. You need to live your authentic lives. And that, to some extent, means being out in appropriate situations and finding what you really want. And the other side saying, no, you can't do this. It'll upset your parents. And the question that those of us on this side of the debate always had was, yeah, but your wives don't know that you're gay. Often it was gay. They weren't bisexual. Or if they were bisexual, do they know that they're not in a monogamous relationship? Do they know that? And it's not like monogamy has to be a part of it, but from all, and maybe I had a vested interest because I take a certain point of view on this, but all that seemed was that these women were being used by these gay men. And when everything comes out, I've never seen it end well. The women are just so badly treated and used. And, you know, and this has happened even, I've known people very close to me, both female and male, where this has happened. And the disclosure is just awful. It's just an awful situation. But anyway, this is what the discussion was always about. The marriages of convenience, they were called. And if you look through the back of the adverts, I think Eastern Eye or maybe gay magazines like Pink Paper, but don't quote me on that. So, some of these magazines they would have looking for an MOC, and they'd even state the region that people came from, sometimes even caste. I'm not even joking. And so it was looking for a matrimonial section of an Indian newspaper. And so people would seek out these marriages. But to be honest, I just thought they were a load of rubbish because you're really going to live your life for someone else. And they would say things like, oh, my grandmother would never understand. And you'd look at them, honey, your grandmother's 70 years old. I'm sure she's lived a life. She knows what's out there. She watches enough Indian Bollywood and Indian serials to know that life isn't quite what it occurs. And I suppose that's the next, that was going through, especially in the noughties. And then something changed. And I think it comes back to what the conversation was in India when the Delhi High Court overturned the ban on being gay. So it was, so the actual thing was a bit more complicated. Now I think it was basically unnatural intercourse. It was a colonial era rule. But that for about 10 years, so the ban was overturned, then it was nullified, and then it went backwards and forwards. And I think it was 2018. That had a huge impact, I noticed, on my parents because they watch probably more Indian news than British news. And on TV programs after TV programs, you were having these really articulate young people, mostly young people, activists in India, mostly in English, or what they watch anyways, mostly in English, so NDTV, having these really balanced debates about being gay. And that really, really it was so transformative that we were able to have that so openly. And just to show there's actually, Westeros is all basically the same. Yes, we have more family values, but fundamentally, we're all human. We all have the same aspirations in life. Some want to get married. I have, but I wouldn't wish that misery on anyone else. You make your own decision whether you want to get married or not. For me, it was a great decision. But that's not for everyone. And I get that. And it's really interesting. And so then I come to this part of my life. So I've been married about 13 years. I had a Hindu wedding. At the time, it was in my parents' back garden. My mother could not understand why I wanted it in my parents' back garden. And in fairness, we saved probably about 20,000 by doing it in our back garden and got to pick our date. But the reason was more because in older times, you actually didn't get married in halls. That's a new invention. So these wedding halls, particularly in India, and actually all across London, the wedding halls didn't exist. And back in the day, you got married in your house. That's how people got married back in the 30s and 40s. And so for me, I wanted to get married in my parents' back garden. They had to have a really good, decent back garden because they live in the Green Belt in Birmingham. I already met a friend who'd be my priest at the wedding. And so that wasn't an issue. And we had it, and it went viral. And I just remember all the comments. This was a time when social media was much more positive. So many people from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh saw when we were doing our fere, and they saw that and they really loved it. And it was really life affirming. And but my husband and I always had a project, and our project was we would have children. That was our thing. And so we have, over the last 5 or 6 years, we've had so many problems because we couldn't sell our house. So if you want to adopt or foster in the United Kingdom, you have to have extra bedrooms, which is not a bad thing for them to specify. But we had to move, and we couldn't move houses for about 4 years because of this cladding issue. And that made us really focused on what actually we wanted. In the end, we didn't go down that role, but we went through the surrogacy route. And we're now 24 weeks expecting twin girls. And that's been very interesting as well. You share that with other South Asians. You get very different reactions on that. I think it hasn't really entered our cultural zeitgeist as yet about having children, but there are a lot of gay couples with both lesbian couples and gay men who have, or even single people actually, who have children through various means, whether it be co-parenting, which has existed from time immemorial, to whether they have, in South Asian people, we often have children from a lot of them have children from previous heterosexual unions as well. So it is interesting that that's available to us. And I think as a history of people, if I go back to where I was when we were coming out in Birmingham, there was just no aspiration there. And meeting all those it just felt broken people like Club Carly telling me, no, you have to do what your parent does. You have to. And there were so few in that generation who were 10 years older than me who actually didn't marry, didn't try to make their parents happy, but actually tried to be self-fulfilled. And so, those people who are about 10, 15, 20 years older than me, they really were quite impressive what they were up against. And so, we do have to pay homage to them, that was acceptable. All the things and all the fights that had to happen in Britain, in India, within our religions as well. And yeah.
So you talked about MOC, marriage of convenience. Did you ever consider one yourself?
No. I'm just built to be slightly too outspoken and authentic. For me, authenticity is so important in life. It doesn't really matter what you do or how much you succeed, as long as you are authentic. So for me, it was never an option. There's such a deception part of it. So some MOCs, I must say, people do enter into it with the knowledge. Their partner has the knowledge. So it might be I've heard of this. I've never really seen many cases of this, but I've heard where the lady might be a lesbian and the gentleman is, a gay woman or a gay man. the vast majority that I saw in my groups of people that I knew, it wasn't that. The woman had no idea. Sometimes she was told the day before the wedding by the groom. Sometimes she was told several years afterwards. And there's just such a deception about that. If it had occurred the other way, maybe I do now know several gay women who were lesbians who entered into it. But I just feel in the South Asian power dynamic of men and women, it's always seemed, most of the time, it seems to be one way. And I just, for me, there's a guttural reaction to that. And I just don't agree with it at all. To claim that it is free and fair is just not right. It's not at all. And even if the woman knew and she was heterosexual, really, so that's what this lady, those were her dreams and aspirations, was it? Are you honestly telling me that? Those of us who have family, who've had more arranged marriages, it's basically decided by the point a few months before the wedding. So you can't back out of it. So there's no real freedom here in decision. And for many people, when they're introduced to partners, there's very little freedom as well. So, no, the deception of it is something that doesn't sit comfortably with me. And it's hard because so why do I feel so personally aggrieved by it? I mean, because it's not me that's doing it. It's not happening to me. I suppose it's when people try to pass it off as a neutral thing. It's not a neutral thing. You are having an impact on other people, and in your entire community, you're invalidating the entire gay community. And that's why I suppose it stings me when people do that. Now, I have to say, some of them, they make it through the course. They tell their wives, they have children, and they stay together however they do. So maybe there is something there, but just for a charade that you can't come out, are you honestly telling me it was worth it? I don't know. For me, no, not at all.
Talk me through your wedding day and what was that experience like? How did you bring in influences or aspects of your cultural identity and your religious background into that day?
Yeah, so it was quite a hard thing. So my dad agreed to come to the wedding, but it was touch and go. And I think he did get slightly bullied by my mum and my brother because they were like, well, where are you going to go? And it was in his back garden, so I didn't quite know where he thought he was going. He did come to the wedding. He didn't get photographed at all that day. There's only one photograph I have of him in the entire wedding. But you know what? That for me was good enough because everything is a journey for everyone. And I do, despite what I've just said about MOCs, I do hold that we have to be compassionate about other people. He's a man born in the 40s. His religious makeup and his outlook on life is different. So well before the wedding, I made my husband watch the film Kabhi Khushi Kabhie Gham. I wanted him to understand why we touch our parents' feet. And maybe this is me maneuvering, but I knew if he touched my parents' feet for a wedding, my father will come to the wedding. I just knew that. But I obviously couldn't tell him that, because if I told my husband anything, he would do exactly the opposite of what I tell him. He's really stubborn. So I made him watch the film, and I said, well, this is why it's really important, because in the film, sorry, I'm not very good with Bollywood film stars, the lady actor, all she ever wanted was her in-laws' blessings. So that was a huge element within the film. So anyway, he did that, and on that basis, and my dad always loved my husband, which is really ironic. He'd met him a few years before, 2 years before, I think it was. And they got on really well. My dad used to be a former school teacher as well, so they had that in common. And he said, oh, you've picked her. And the other thing about Chris was, so Chris taught in Snaresbrook or Gants Hill. So these are very Asian areas. So and fairly middle-class Asian areas. So he kind of understood from that what it was like to be Asian, especially in Snaresbrook. And that really helped with my parents as well. So that was the preparation. And then it was when he touched the feet that he agreed to come. But all day there was this kind of, it was hard. And at times he would be inside the marquee. At times he'd be out. We did all the Punjabi customs, like the Milni that you have at the front. I didn't even have enough relatives because my mum also didn't want our relatives in India to know. So I had to have my friends from university to be in various positions. The people always said the food was amazing, and I believe that as well. It will cost a fortune. It was from Itias in Birmingham, which was our favorite. I don't know if it's still around. It's our favorite restaurant in Birmingham. And
so you mentioned the Milni. Could you just explain for people who wouldn't know what that is, what that involves typically, and how yours was different?
Yeah, so Milnis are where you have the meetings of the two families, and generally you give a small token. So Chris's, so at the beginning of the ceremony, we had Chris's family was in the front garden, and that's where they formed, and we formed in the back garden. And then their barat came from the front garden to the back garden. And then as soon as the two families met, and I was still in the house at this point, I didn't see the Milni actually, because there was a sudden thunder shower. So they all rushed into the marquee. Everyone said it was a good omen. Who knows about these things? And so I've only seen it from the pictures and the videos. But then you'd have one member of each family. So you'd have the mother of one of the people getting married, so of the grooms, and the other mother of the groom would meet each other. And I don't quite know why, but in Punjabis, generally, it's almost like a wrestling competition occurs. So who can lift who up? And some people go and they look at the order and they make friends with the other person. So they say, look, we won't do that. Other people and my mum had her knees done, both knees had, she still lifted. So Chris's mother was quite poorly that day. She had bipolar, so she wasn't able to make it to the wedding. So he lifted Chris's gran. I don't think the English people in the wedding kind of got what was going on with the Milni. So that was quite funny. But my friends were like, oh no, we're definitely lifting up the other side. And there was aunts, uncles, because he had his all extended family. Even an uncle from Leicester who'd never eaten anything apart from meat and 2 veg. And I was like, no, Chris, everyone in Britain can eat Indian food. I'm sorry. So that's the Milni. And then you have, after that, so you have to change some of the religious rituals, because I don't know how explicit I can be, but there's a ceremony in Hinduism where the father of the bride gives the vagina to the groom. And that is actually what happens in the ceremony. So we had to change certain elements of it to make it more gender neutral. Also, those parts are now often left out. You find progressive Hindus and Sikhs will leave out certain elements of the ceremony. The vows we had to change them slightly, because it's mostly from the bride to the groom. And then there's one that the groom makes. So we made it a bit, there's 7 vows you actually make. But they're quite universal. I will respect your family. I will speak to you in a nice way. And you find that, so for thousands of years, people have been making the same vows. And actually, they're as important then as they were now. And then, and so you do the yajna. That's the religious fire ceremony. And I had a friend of mine he does a lot of both straight and gay weddings. He's more master of ceremonies rather than the actual priest. But he was the one who did that entire ceremony. I always remember, so in our family, we have a propensity to have a flower fight every time flowers come out. And how are you going to explain this to white people? I mean, I did say to my family, please don't take. So one of the things that happens is the groom has a lot of people take the mick out of the groom. I said, don't do that to him. He won't get it. Can we not nobody's going to steal anyone's shoes here. We're not going to have any of this go on because it just won't get it. And it's just, so anyway, people respected that. So I was in a sharwani. I got it made from Appleton. It came all the way from India. He was in a suit. And the color of our wedding was saffron. And because it was a garden, it was like the theme was colonial garden party. That was the kind of how we did the whole theme. And it was, and all the tables were named after, so there's this thing called, he's from Wales, Wonders of Wales. So the 7 Wonders of Wales. I think in the end we had 12. And the main table had the longest place name in Wales. Don't ask me to repeat it. But it's this station and it's got a name that's about 25 letters long. Everyone knows it. And I've been there as well and taken a picture with that. So all of them were named after these important places in Wales, all the tables, sorry. So we tried to infuse the Welshness. Also our centre things in were saffron, mango, magnolia, something, and the Welsh leeks mixed in, so the centerpieces. I found that very tedious, having to go to a florist and get that done. But anyway, and our lapels were there was a Welsh influence in the flowers as well. I think we had daffodils actually, or a version of daffodils because it wasn't the right time of year. So yeah, we really tried to mix the Welshness with the Indianness.
Can you talk me through the reception, the party part? What was that like, and were there any traditions or any aspects of a traditional Indian wedding that kind of made it, or was there any other queer influences that made the wedding as well?
We had a Bhangra group with a doll. We also did the Indian Congo. I feel that's very Indian. And we went right in the house to the front street and back again. What else was there Indian? I mean, there was some Indian music. We had, probably the queer influence was, we had Whitfield's Saturday Night, and then we had the Macarena, and then the Slides. Oh, I can't remember the song. You know, it's very big in Essex. Slide something. And there was one other song we had. But we had these 4 dances where, I mean, I had to learn them, some of them, because I didn't remember the Macarena or Saturday Night. Wigfield, that was it. So yeah, that was probably the queer Scot. I think there was also Dancing Queen might have happened as well. Later on in the reception, we also had kulfi as well, because now it's a thing, you have to have extra food. So it was really, and I was always struck. So we had these restaurant people from Itias who made fresh naans whilst people were eating them. But what really struck me was how much the waitresses, they all felt like the momentousness of the occasion and how it was significant. And I remember when I was making my speech, I could see them with tears in their eyes as well. So that's probably a bit different because I made the speech rather than my father, or because I didn't quite know if he was up to it. I didn't actually ask him in the end. I just thought I'd make the speech. But he was there. He was there the whole time. And I think that really was quite important. You know, like somebody becomes your hero. And I suppose in a way he became the hero of the wedding from all of that.
Talk me through some key moments in the wedding and your feeling towards it. So, for example, how were you feeling in the lead up to the wedding compared to the wedding day and then compared to after?
It's very hard to remember your own wedding day. I don't know if you've been married. I can't really. The anxiety was whether he was going to come to the wedding. The anxiety whether everything, like just the normal wedding anxiety, is everything going to happen? And it kind of just happens by itself is what I would notice. I don't really remember much about the wedding. It was just really stressful, but it just happened. I just remembered being really annoyed at the photographer, keeping asking us to do things and not wanting to do anything with the photographer. But, you know, you do it. And I was like, well, that's it. I'm not going to do any more. It was very unique at the time. Now, I think people forget how there is so many I see on Instagram, on Facebook, the amount of Asian, white, or even just Asian gay weddings is just so common. Even back in the home country, you see it. But that time it was very, very rare. And what people did was they had a civil ceremony. But for me, that wasn't enough. And I wanted both. So that's not actually the day we got officially married. That was just the religious ceremony, which was, I think, 2 or 3 days after our civil ceremony. But that is what we celebrate as our wedding day.
For you, or for many LGBTQ plus people, they form what we would call a chosen family. Mm. What has the role of chosen family been in your journey, and the role of the queer community in that?
So I think at the moment, my chosen family is definitely Gay Indian Network and the role I have in there. And I think it's a really good question. When I was at university, it was the LGBT society at university, the one at SOAS. And it is important. And the one thing I've been very lucky was I was told by someone just before I went to university, a very good friend of mine, Sue, said to me, you know, don't just fall into a crowd of gay men who look like you. I think it was quite wise advice. And I was very lucky at my university. There was trans people, there was gay women. It was, and where we were, because it was SOAS, there were people of different nationalities and gender. Different nationalities and different races. So I've always been lucky in that respect. And I think that's really important. not to just have friends who just look like you, because your outlook then gets quite limited quite quickly. Yeah.
And what does solidarity within the queer community look like to you?
It is difficult question. I think we've been on such a long journey. Very quickly, things have changed in society. Especially, I'm noticing with South Asian society, particularly for the Indians, where cousins are accepting you. There's no risk. You know, when we came out, especially among Punjabis, the risk of being beaten the shit out by your brothers, fathers, cousins was so great. I think there's less, I would say, even in Punjabis, certainly less risk of violence than there used to be. There's less risk of rejection. It's not completely not there. And I can't say that because it's very famous examples of where it has happened. I knew, so there's an organization called the Matter Naz Project. It's a really awful story, but Naz and I used to catch a bus together. We went to the same youth group in Birmingham when we were, he must have been first year university, I imagine. He went to school with my brother, actually. That's how well I know him. And so when we came to London, we'd see each other and we'd talk, and it is difficult. What for me the solidarity means is that no one should be left behind. And I look at sometimes our Muslim Pakistani brothers and sisters, and I see that things haven't progressed for them as they have for us. Our children are going to be so privileged to grow up in a world that doesn't even look at sexuality anymore. Those of us in the Indian community, particularly in Hindus, there's just not an issue that I see. A bit more in the Sikh community, certainly more in the Muslim community, where I am still hearing of people being forced to go back to the motherland and I don't know why I call it that. It sounds weird. Go back to Pakistan or Bangladesh and being forced into marriages. Very rare amongst Sikhs, but still I have heard of one or two friends who that's happened to. Not anymore amongst Hindus. There's good, but if you can't leave anyone behind in this journey. That is actually, for me, that is all our responsibility to make sure that the world is a better place.
And if you could preserve one personal story or experience for history, what would that be?
I think one of the times that had a real big impact on me was when one of my really good friends came out to me as trans. And I think, and her name's Asifa Lahore. She's very famous now, but I knew her before those days. And I just thought, this thing about self-discovery, about being authentic, it's never an ending journey. Whether it's to do with people's sexuality, to do with their gender identity, we don't quite know where someone's going to end up. And the amount of courage it takes for people to live their authentic life, that it can never be underestimated.
Anything that you would like to add or feel that you wanted to say but didn't get an opportunity to?
2 years ago, I walked through Pride, London Pride with Jin. We were waving Indian flags, LGBT flags, and Joshi, who's the leader of Jin, he made sure we had one Pakistani flag as well. And we really wanted to do that. And the one Bangladeshi flag as well. Because we wanted to show that we truly are inclusive. But I always remember as you walk through Piccadilly and then you walk through Trafalgar Square, just the sheer number of people screaming, and shouting and saying, "Go India, go India." And we were dressed up in traditional costume, in traditional national dress. It's like the whole world is willing you on. And I remember turning to my friend, got to me and goes, "Oh my gosh, we've really indoctrinated the entire generation into our way of thinking." And it feels like that. We are now on the winning side. It didn't feel like that when I was 18 and sneaking into Club Kali, where you were kind of almost afraid. As soon as you left the building, you felt... I talked about the drag queens taking off their wigs and that. You didn't want to get beaten up. And you don't know who else could be outside. And that's just how far we've come. And I think that needs to be noted.
Thank you once again.
No worries. Thank you.